Okay, so this is what we're going over today. We'll give an Accela launch overview, talk about some critical dates around launch, upcoming events. We'll do a minor utility permit overview, talk about some revised revisions to the utility major permit thresholds. Then we'll go over the utility major permit, process steps, the same for both permit types, document requirements. We'll talk about the new 6-month open period for utility permits and how the permit expiration interacts with the use expiration, application steps from the portal, and then how to apply for a utility permit from the portal. And then we'll just go into how to find the status of a permit, how to respond to corrections, and how to find documents from the portal, how to make changes to an issued permit. We'll do an inspections overview and how to schedule an inspection. We'll go over our changes to our side sewer permit process with SDCI. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to get help after launch. If you have questions along the way, feel free to use the chat window or unmute yourself if you feel comfortable doing that. Okay, so we are launching into Accela for many reasons. One of the reasons is we desperately needed to improve our transparency and predictability in our permit system. We did a lot of great work automating functionality in Accela that requires a lot of manual data entry today. And also gave us an opportunity to integrate permit processes with SDCI. Right now, we only have integration with SDCI, but we hope to expand that to SPU and other users of Accela. Okay, so coming up on the weekend of November 7th, this is SDOT's last implementation into Accela. So this is a big one for us. This is SDOT's biggest launch so far. Right now, we already have our traffic, public space management, and annual vehicle permits in Accela. And then come November, everything except for streetifications will be in there. Okay, so for our launch coming up in a couple of weeks, these are the permit types going into Accela: our right-of-way construction, right-of-way maintenance, heavy crane, minor utility and utility majors that we're talking about today, street improvement, and final plat. Okay, here's some critical milestones around our launch date. So this Friday is the last day to submit any modification or extension request via email. If you don't apply for permits using our online web form, it is also the last day to submit email applications. So please plan accordingly and get anything to us, to SDOT permits by end of day Friday. And next Wednesday, the online web form for new applications will be cut off at 5 p.m. That is also the cutoff for job start requests and inspection off hour requests. And then next Friday at 3 p.m., the online web form will be cut off for payments. And that's also when we are retiring the SDOT permits email inbox. So after next Friday, please only communicate with us through the SDOT permits email. The weekend of the 7th, that is when we are doing our automated conversion, and our release 2 goes live into production. Please note, if you're an Accela user for anything outside of the permits we're talking about for R2, that Accela will not be accessible that weekend to support our launch. So November 9th, it will be the first time you guys will be able to access your converted permits. There's some complications there that I talked about in the SSP overview workshop around how you can link your converted contacts to your converted permits. But if you already have that set up, you'll be able to see your converter permits. We will be closed. Street use will be closed both on Monday, November 9th and Tuesday, November 10th, but our Accela phone line and email will be accessible, so you guys can get help with seeing and not only seeing your converted permits and converted contacts and how you link those two up, but also if you have any questions on how to apply for a permit in Accela. Then we have the holiday on Wednesday. And then we're open for normal business on Thursday, November 12th. That's also the day that our SDCI site sewer and standalone curb cut integrations go into production. So please, you guys, please pay attention to these dates and plan your permitting and projects accordingly. Okay, so today we are doing the utility permit overview. Also this week, we have our construction permit overview and our street improvement overview. We have amendments next week, and I'll be getting the general Q&A session set up this week as well. That information will be in our newsletter that's coming out on Friday. Okay, so just a reminder, everyone, we are doing one workshop per topic. We are recording these workshops, and we'll get all the recording of the workshops on our new Accela updates website linked right here, okay? So we already have these two workshops, the recording of these two workshops on that website along with the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, any questions before we start talking about utility permits? All right, so let's go over what the minor utility permit looks like in Accela. We are transitioning out of using use codes and more into using use types. And so from the portal, your view from the portal, you will only see these Accela use types, the descriptions here. You will no longer see any sort of use code reference. So the minor utility permit is used to permit utility installation, staging, and restoration in the right-of-way. Installations like service installation or small gas under 2-inch gas mainline installations. All amendments are available after issuance on the minor utility permit, and the record ID for these are SUE Util. SUE Util. That'll be the name of these permits. Nothing really quite different with these, the types of use we have on here. We were able to sum up a lot of the 51 use codes into one utility infrastructure use type. And I'll talk more about how we were able to do that when we start talking about the fields in the application. Okay, so let's talk about utility major thresholds. We have revised these a little bit just to make it clearer. We understand there was some confusion with how they were outlined previously. So if your project meets any of the below criteria, it will require a utility major permit. Any project that contains complex technical issues, such as deep excavations, that may have an impact to existing city assets and/or infrastructure. Installation of gas mainlines greater than 2 inches in diameter. Installation of a utility line longer than 100 lineal feet on an arterial street. Installation of a utility line longer than 300 lineal feet on a non-arterial street in a single family or low-rise zones. Removal of an underground storage tank. Any massive environmental remediation or contaminated soil cleanup. Work that triggers curb ramps installations due to utility work. Area-based work that exceeds a 1 block radius. So that means if you're doing a lot of pole installations or replacements, more than a 1 block radius, you will have to do that large area permitting under the utility major permit. And then if the method of installation is directional or horizontal boring, that also needs to be done under the utility major permit. Okay, and as always, we may require utility major permit beyond the threshold listed here due to the complexity of the work and the impacts to existing infrastructure. One note here is we have a new use type under the street improvement permit called public main, SIP public main, and that's where the SPU sewer, water, and storm main extensions will be permitted, no longer under utility major permit, under a SIP public main permit. Any questions around any of these? All right, let's talk about the utility major permit here. Nothing really has changed with how this permit looks like. It's used to permit utility installation, staging, and restoration in the right-of-way that has larger impacts than the minor utility permit per the thresholds we just went over. All amendments are available after issuance, and the record ID is SUUMP. SUUMP. Okay, just two uses available on this one: major utility infrastructure and small wireless facility. Okay, so this is kind of how our Accela permit numbers are decoded. We have the kind of like the structure of what it is, where it is in the front. So street use utility major permit, and then the number string is at the end here. So again, for utility permits, you have SUUMP for utility major permits and SUUtil for minor utility permits. Okay, let's talk about the process steps. So one of the good things we were able to do in Accela is really align our permitting processes. And so the permit process is the same. The steps are the same for both utility permit types. We call this the full workflow. The majority of our permits do use the full workflow. William, do you want to address Kyle Kahn's question on what is considered deep excavation?
Yeah, sure. Generally, deep excavations are anything over 4 feet. Okay, a lot of time 4 feet, there's nothing around it. There's not much impact. However, you're going to be like 8 feet or 10 feet. You're adjacent to a ramp or some sort of existing pipe or gas main or water main line. That's something we want to make sure that it's done properly so that it's taken care of. It depends on the excavation and the mean method. So there is some interpretation on that.
Did that answer your question, Kyle? Okay, great. Okay, so here are the permit steps for the utility permits. We have our application, which you do through the Seattle Services Portal and gets reviewed by our applicant services group. Screening is the first step of the review process. It's really the reviewer screening. This is where we screen documents to make sure that they meet minimum requirements and also to make sure that nothing else is needed before we go into the review phase of it. The primary review is a street use reviewer. Secondary reviewers are like when we have to send outside of street use to perform a review. The most popular ones are Access Seattle or Hub, and then our TCP Plan Review Group in our Transportation Operations Division. Review evaluation, that's when we'll consolidate all the review and either everything's approved and it's ready to go to issuance, or we have to send out for a correction cycle. Issuance prep is typically not needed for these permits, but if you had a bond or indemnity agreement, that's where that would be reviewed. And then issuance is when the permit is issued, and then it goes into inspection. And eventually, when all your inspections are done, it'll be closed. Okay, so let's talk about minor utility document requirements. The right-of-way impact plan is the same as it is today. That is required for every use type under the minor utility permit at application. You cannot submit your application until you upload that document. Site plan is the same. You have to submit that at application. However, this is not required for the site sewer/drainage use type. The letter of authorization will be required if the applicant or financially responsible party is different from the owner contact. Traffic control plan will be required. Either application if you're savvy enough to know that to trigger that through the street category option, and I'll talk about that later on in the application process. If you do that at the application, you cannot submit your application until the traffic control plan is uploaded, or the reviewer will catch it at the screening step. If we catch it at the screening step, that means we have to go back out to you to upload that before we can start the review process. One thing that we have done is we've worked with our transportation operations and transit and mobility divisions on kind of integrating the street use permit with when there's paid parking impacts. So if your project is impacting paid parking, we will need some sort of proof that you've applied for that parking permit, right? That paid parking permit, that temporary no parking permit. Typically, the street use reviewer will confirm this just by doing a search in Accela. But if you have a copy of your permit or the email that you submitted it successfully, you can upload that at any time. John asks, is the work zone impact plan not a required document for minor utility permits? So we renamed that to the right-of-way impact plan a couple of years ago. So the work zone impact plan is the same thing as the right-of-way impact plan. Yeah, I would go ahead and check out CAM 2116. That's actually linked in this presentation. It's pretty much the same thing. Paid parking is available on an external map. I can send that out to you guys after the workshop. Okay, and of course we have other documents depending on your project location and impact. Examples of this is a historic district, certification of approval, holiday construction moratorium waiver, payment moratorium, etc. Those are all due at review evaluation. Yes, Aaron, you do have to apply for the parking permit before the dates are scheduled. Just apply. You don't have to have it issued. You just have to apply for it. Any other questions on the paid parking permit? Yes, we'll talk about that when we get to how to apply for our utility permit, Aaron. Okay, and then the corrections response, that is the document type that we refer to as the street use comment sheet with your responses. So if that was required as part of the correction cycle, you have to submit that at the screening task when you're responding back to the corrections. Okay, utility major permit document requirements. This is a little bit different than it is today. So we've recognized that the traffic control plan or right-of-way impact plan is most of the time not ready at the start of a utility major permit. So we do not require those at the start of this process any longer. So at application, what is required is the utility and restoration plan. Please note that we are converting CAM 2600 to our utility work in the right-of-way webpage. So the plan requirements that you used to find in CAM 2600 will now be found in this webpage. Okay. And again, the letter of authorization would be required if the applicant or FRP is different from the owner contact. Traffic control plan, it's a little bit different for utility major permits. The UMP reviewer will kind of make the call when they're going to ask for that. But typically, we're going to ask for the traffic control plan, right-of-way impact plan, and phase schedule manager after the first review cycle. Right? So we're not asking that for upfront. Again, the temporary no parking confirmation is the same as we just discussed, and the other documents are the same, as well as a corrections response. All right, let's talk about our new 6-month open period on utility permits. So during the what I like to call the Great Migration of 2016, we introduced this concept to utility permits, really just to alleviate the amount of extensions that we needed to do on minor utility permits. And so the idea was we gave the utility permits a 90-day open period to allow them to get the installation and restoration work done in that period. However, after hearing you guys' feedback and engaging with a lot of utilities before we started our design sessions for Accela, we understood that that 90 days was not long enough most of the time to get all that work completed. So we have extended that to 6 months. This is only for new uses issued in Accela after November 9th. So the 6-month period begins with the earliest use start date for the initial issuance, right? So the 6-month period will be from the earliest use start date plus 6 months. I have visuals of this that I'll bring up in a second. Now, here's the thing that I'm not sure we've all been practicing the way that we should be. If the duration of the work extends past the issue duration, so say you ask for 20 days and you're realizing there's, something went awry and you need the permit for 40 days, you do have to come back to us and get that additional 20 days issued, right? And if that is required, make sure that if you're in a hub area, that you're coordinating those dates with the hub coordinator at the same time you're asking for the extension. So just a reminder, everyone, for all sort of date changes after the first issuance, you have to coordinate that directly with the hub coordinator. If the extended use period goes beyond the previous 6 months, a new 6-month period will start based on the previous permit expiration date, right? So that 6-month window just kind of carries over. The only exception to that is if there are multiple uses on a utility permit and one use extends past the 6-month period, then your duration's already taken care of that 6-month open period. So your permit expiration is actually going to be set to the latest use expiration. All right, so let's see this in a visual. This is kind of, complicated. So I try to show this visually to help. So initial issuance, you have your use start date, your duration, and your use expiration date, all right? So your use expiration date will be the same as it ever was, but your permit expiration will be the earliest use start date plus 6 months, right? So you have to pay attention to what your use expiration date is and what your permit expiration date is. If you are outside this time zone and you're in a hub area, you have to coordinate with your hub coordinator. All right, so let's talk about an extension within the original 6 months. So say that you weren't able to get it done within the 12 days, you need another 10 days to do the work. You'll just extend it, but since you're within the original 6-month open period, you stay within that 6-month open period, right? But if you extend beyond the original 6-month open period, then you'll get a new 6-month open period. But this one is based on the permit expiration, not the earliest use start date like the initial issuance. Okay. All right, so let's get to the wonky one. I call this the wonky one. If there are multiple uses on a utility permit and one use extends past the 6-month open period, the permit expiration is then the latest expiration date, right? Because, you know, this is 200 days here, right? So you have your first use, which is only 20 days. Your second use is 200 days. So this permit expiration is this use expiration. Your duration went past the 6-month open period. So that's why that is, right? You kind of created your own 6-month open period. Any questions on any of that? So, right, Aaron, the whole point of this 6-month open period is that if you go past your use expiration, you don't have to apply for an amendment, an extension amendment. You just have to coordinate with the hub coordinator if you're in a hub. Okay, any other questions on that? Both the use expiration and permit expiration will print on your permit, so just make sure you're paying attention to that. Okay, moving on. Okay, we're about to go into how to apply for utility permit. So the application steps are the same for both utility permits. You start with selecting the permit type you want or need. You'll enter your project address. You'll add contacts. You'll enter the project and location description. Enter related information. You'll enter your use details. Upload required documents. Do a quick QA review of the application information, make sure it's accurate, and then you'll submit. And you'll get a thank you confirmation. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right, so just a reminder, everyone, to apply for a permit, you have to have a Seattle Services Portal account. Right, you have to be logged in to apply for any permit on the enterprise Accela system. Right, if you do not have a login, please take a look at the Seattle Services Overview workshop we did last week. We also have really great help on the help center here on how to do that. Okay, so let's talk really quickly about what you can do if you're logged in versus what you can't do. So if you're logged in and you're a permit contact or a delegate of a permit contact, you can apply for applications, you can withdraw an application, you can view and upload documents, respond to corrections. No, so this whole process is replacing the application, you guys. There is no more fillable PDF application. Accela is the application. Yep. You can make changes to an issue permit and assign delegates. If you are not logged in and you're not a permit or contact or delegate of a permit contact, the only thing you can do is search for permits, view permit information except for documents, make payments, and schedule an inspection. So delegates are just a way that you can give somebody else access to your permits. I'm not going to go into super duper detail about delegates in this presentation, but there's a lot of great information on the portal and the help center about delegates. So I'll just tell you how to add a delegate to your account, what a delegate can do, how to manage delegates, and if you are a delegate, how to accept delegate permissions. Okay, back to the application. Okay, once you're logged in, under this Create New section, you click on the Permits-Street Use link here. That's where you'll find access to all our permits. We have different groupings once you get there. Utility permits are under the Utility section. Under that section, we have annual vehicle permits, minor utility, and utility major permits. We have some really good help text here for you guys, but please note that this line is incorrect and will be removed shortly after launch. So we did maintain curb ramps triggered by utility work is under the utility major permit, not the SIP light permit. Sorry about that miss there, but I just want to point that out to everyone. So please do, if you're unsure about what permit type you need, please do reference the web pages we link in the help text here. Make sure you are applying for the right permit. Once you've determined what permit you need, click in the circle here and then click Continue Application. So let's just kind of give an overview before we dive into it of what the application page looks like. So these are the steps of your application as you're moving along. We also call these breadcrumbs. This step 1 here, this indicates what step you're on. And then as you're moving along the pages, different pages here, it'll tell you what you've already done. So once you get to step 2, you'll be on step 2, and you can see that step 1 is already completed. Anything with a red asterisk is a required field. You can save and resume an application at any time and come back to it when you want. Or you can move to the next step using the Continue Application button. Dot maps will remain separate, Sunshine. Good question. That is a completely different tool. Accela does not have a project right-of-way management function to it. Okay, moving on in the application process. So the first page here is your project address. This is a lot easier than it is in Hanson right now. At least I think it is. So you can kind of do it in 2 ways. We recommend that you enter the information, the required red asterisk information, and then click the search button. If there's not an exact match, a pop-up window will show up here. And you just need to click on the right address and then click on select. Please also note, if there's a street number, you can just enter the number here, and that'll give you the best results. Instead of doing third, just enter the number 3. So once you have the right address selected, click on Continue Application. It's going to take you to page 2, which is the contacts page. Let's talk about contacts for a second here. On all street use permits, we have 4 required contacts. We have applicant, that's the individual applying for the permit. We have owner, that is the property, business, or asset / infrastructure owner. This gets a little confusing with utility work. If you are hired by the asset owner, that's fine too. You're still the owner of the permit, right? The financially responsible party is the organization responsible for paying all related fees and charges. The on-site contact, that is the individual who street use calls to respond to events. So it's like storm response and stuff like that. Like if your fence flew over, that's who we're going to call. Okay, there's some cool functionality as you're adding your contacts along the way. The select from account button here will auto-populate the contact associated with your login account. So if you're the applicant, you can just click select from account and bam, boom, you're up there as the applicant. You can add new if there is a new contact needed, but please do this cautiously, you guys. We do not want to cause duplicate contacts in Accela as much as possible. So before you add a new contact, please do a good search in the lookup function to make sure that contact doesn't already exist. Hi, Kyle. If you are trenching and you trigger ADA curb ramps, you need to submit for one utility major permit because of the curb ramp requirement. So once you've added at least one contact, for each one, you can select the same as function and tell Accela that you want the owner to be the applicant or you want the owner to be the FRP, all the way down. It's kind of hard to show on a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, we have additional contacts. So we just went through the required contacts. We have additional contacts that you can add as you see fit. Arborist, architect, authorized agent, contact, contractor, engineer, and vending operator. Authorized agent and contact receive all permit correspondence. Just FYI. Okay, so once you're on the contacts page, enter all required applicants as we just went over. If you want to add additional contacts, you can do that also on the contacts page. Once you're done adding all your contacts, hit the continue application button. All right, now we're on page 3, project information. This is where you're going to enter your project name, if you want, and your project and location description. So for every street use permit type, we have examples of what we want the project or location description to look like, and also what information we want added in there. So take a look at that help text if you're not sure what to add in there. So once you enter that information, you can click the continue application button. A lot of clicking of the continue application button. That's how you get from page to page. Okay, so now we're on page 4, related information. All right, so we have a bunch of fields here that you can add in related permit information for SCCI or SDOT. We have 2 customer reference work order fields that we promised SPU and SEL. This first one prints on the invoice. Here's where you put your street and utility improvement plan number or your dot maps number. We have the 24-hour contact name that defaults to the applicant information. If it's somebody else, you can just type it in here. And we have restoration party, which defaults to owner. If it's somebody else, you can type it in here. If it's unknown at this time, you can also say that as well. So once you're done entering all that information, oh no, sorry, it's utility permit. We have extra fields and sections in the utility permit. Okay, so scroll down and you'll get to this utility information section. This section is going to tell us what type of utility you're working on. These are radio buttons that we default to no. All of them default to no. In order for you to submit your application, you have to click at least one yes. Jeff, the street and utility improvement plan number is neither of those things. It is the coordination right-of-way management dot maps number. So click at least one yes. You can click more than one yeses if you're working on more than one type of utility. We also require you to tell us what your method of installation here, but please know this is a free text field here. You'll just have to type in what you're doing. If you select other here, another free text box will pop up that you'll need to enter information into before you can move forward. Andrew, just select the type of utility you're working on, relevant to the permit application you're applying for, to the work you're doing. Any other questions on this utilities information section? This is the section that allowed us to sum up most of the 51 use codes into one use type. All right, so that brings us to the other utility section. It's work type information. So now that we know what type of utility you're working on, we also need to know what you're doing with that utility, right? So again, these are all default to no. You have to select at least one yes, and you can select more than one yes if that is the case. So just tell us what you're doing with that utility. Okay, once you're done entering all the information, click on the Continue Application button. All right, you guys. So I think most of you should know that with this Accela launch, we have also updated our use fee methodology. And so I'm going to talk about that, what that looks like, and how to use that new use fee methodology. It is not too different from what we did last year's update, but there is some differences. So as probably some of you know, with our R1 launch on June 10th, 2019, we implemented a new use fee methodology. That was the first time we changed our use fee methodology since 2005. So since we haven't changed it in so long, we didn't get it, quite tuned up the way we wanted to. So for this launch, this revision, I should say, we wanted to kind of make it more user-friendly and also make the impacts appropriate to the location. So we increased the factors for blocked transit, bike, and pedestrian facilities. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a second. We increased the factor for working in an urban center, and we reduced the fees for work outside urban zones and on non-arterial streets. We've also changed the calculation so that all impacts can be summed up at the frontage level, whereas before you had to enter the sidewalk separate from the bike lane, separate from the travel lane. But there's some nuance to that, and I'll talk about that in a second. So this is what the use section looks like in your application. We have use type. You can select the drop-down menu to pull up what uses are available on that permit application. We have site of street, which looks pretty much just as it does today. Use area is the square footage that you're closing the right of way. Sidewalk impact is any sort of concrete sidewalk or asphalt pedestrian pathway. Your options for that are intermittent closure, reduced with, closed, or rerouted. Bike lane impact, that's any dedicated bike lane, 24/7 dedicated bike lane. Your options for that is intermittent closure, closed, or rerouted. Travel lanes, any general purpose travel lane. Your options are reduced width, intermittent closure, some lanes closed, which just means one or more. All lanes closed means road closure. Transit lane impact, that's any 24/7 dedicated bus lane or other transit lane. Intermittent closure, closed or rerouted. Parking lane, your only option there is none or closed. And then we summed up kind of the rest of it into this catch-all other right-of-way impact section. So that includes the planning strip, the filler, gravel shoulder. Okay, I hope I can see. It sounds like the traffic control plan will start after the first free. So Wani, you're talking about the utility major permit, right? It really depends on on the reviewer and who's screening the application when the traffic control plan will be required. If you have the documents ready, just upload them. Then that's for everyone. If you have your documents ready to go, just upload everything you have. That's totally fine. Thanks, Dale. Okay, so let's talk about what these impact option definitions are. Intermittent closures are for short-term, less than 5 minutes typically, closures 3 times or less an hour to stop the traveling public using a flagger or UPO. So if you need to quickly boom over the right-of-way and stop the pedestrians for a few minutes, that's what that intermittent closure is for. Reduced width for sidewalk, that means there's a partial sidewalk closure, but you're allowing at least 4-foot pedestrian pathway. And in downtown, we might ask for more. For general purpose travel lanes, reduced width means that you reduce the travel lane, but people can still drive through it, right? So for instance, it was originally 12 feet wide and now it's 11 feet wide. Rerouted means you are rerouting the traveling public to somewhere else. So if they were originally in the sidewalk and you're rerouting them to the parking lane, that's what that means. Closed means there's nobody getting through it. Again, some lanes closed means one or more lanes closed. All lanes closed means road closure. Okay, any questions on any of that? For the utility permits, you have to enter at least one use line to apply for the application. We have a new section called work days. You can indicate if you're working every day, which is Monday through Sunday, weekdays only, or weekends only. Okay, so let's talk about how to use this new use fee methodology. The terms we use in the use fee, the fee schedule here are not the same terms we use in Accela, so I just want to make you guys aware of that and tell you what it does mean. When we say transit blocked, bike blocked, or pedestrian blocked, what we're meaning is those facilities are closed, right? So the sidewalk's closed, the bike lane's closed, the transit lane is closed. If the sidewalk is partially closed, but there are still people able to move around the closure, that is that reduced width option. So again, although we've changed the equation to allow you to sum up all the closures under one frontage, which means one line, one use line, you want to pay attention to the types of closures that have these additional factors associated with them, so you're not, unintentionally being charged parking lane at the rate of a sidewalk closed. So let's talk about that. Sorry, these came out kind of blurry. So I have a couple examples here for you guys. And just know that we're going to look at this too as part of our review to make sure that we're also separating out the impacts that have, and those additional factors to them from the impacts that don't. So for minor utility project on a non-arterial street for 10 days, since non-arterial streets don't incur use fees for the first 30 days, you can sum up all those closures under one line without impacting anything. You're not getting charged use fees anyway. Where it gets a little complicated is if you're on arterial streets, and for that one, you do want to add in 2 lines. One line that has the impacts with the safety factors, mobility and safety factors, and one line that has the impacts that don't have the mobility and safety factors. So for instance, use line A here has the sidewalk and transit lane impacts on one line, because those do have those additional factors associated with them. Or line B has the travel lane and parking lane impacts on it, because those closures do not have the additional factors. associated with them. Okay, any questions on that before we move forward? Kyle, I don't know what you mean by the PDF version of the phase schedule manager. No. You guys are kind of throwing out random questions. So we actually have a new fillable version of the phase schedule manager out on the interwebs. That is still required as part of the utility major permit. So that the utility major reviewer knows how to adjust these use lines. So we don't expect you to add in everything from the phase schedule manager at application. You only have to add at least one use line. So I would say at application, you really don't know when you're working, so just take your best guess. And then that's why we still have the phase schedule manager, because at application, you really didn't know. Does that make sense? So when you do know, submit the phase schedule manager, and then we'll correct this on the back end for you. Nope, the minor utilities do not require a phase schedule manager because that is relatively real time. Okay, any questions on that before we hop back into the application? Okay, so again, you only have to enter in one use line. For minor utilities, it's probably more relevant for you to enter in more lines if you have them. But just take your best stab of it and we'll review it and correct it on the back end. So anything with a red asterisk is a required field. You have to enter the use type, side of street, use area, all the impacts, use start date, duration, and work days. The space and rate start date will default to A and 1. And the expiration date will autofill once you enter your use start date and duration. So once you're done submitting all that information, click the Submit button. Okay, so this is page 5, the use information. Once you enter your first use row, it'll show up here in this table. You can add a row if you want to add another row. You can edit. You can even delete. But if you delete it, you'll be another pop-up window will show up for you to add a new one, I believe. You have to have at least one use line to move forward in the application. So once you're done, click on Continue Application button. Okay, and then that comes to the Upload Documents page. So to upload a document, click on the Select button here. That'll pop up this window. You'll have to select a document from your computer, right? Once you've done that, you have to click on this drop-down menu from the document type. Tell Accela what document it is. Is it the site plan? Is it the right-of-way impact plan? Traffic control plan, whatever it is. That matches the requirement in the application, which I'll talk about in a second. Optionally, you can add a description in this box, right? So once you're done, you can click the Save button. If you're done, if you need to upload more, click the Select button here to add more documents. Okay, once you're done, you will see this green banner. If you try to submit without uploading all required documents, this banner will turn red and tell you what you're missing, right? But once you have everything uploaded, it'll turn green, and you click on the Continue Application button, it'll turn green. All right, it will not let you progress until you've uploaded all required documents. Any questions on that? Okay, and we get, once you're done, oh, this is for the utility major permit. I just wanted to point out that this is what it'll look like. You only have your utility and restoration plan. Okay, now we get to the end of the application. Please do a last review of all the sections before you click submit, right? So you can go back to any of the pages that we just went over. You can use these edit buttons to edit anything that needs updating, right? So please do a quick QA review before you submit. Once you are ready to submit your application, you have to check this box down here. This is the terms and agreements box. You can read the language up here. This is kind of the old, sign your application option in Accela. Okay, so once you check this box, click on the continue application button. And voila, as long as everything went through Groovy, you have just successfully submitted your application. Your record number would be highlighted here. If you want to open that record number, permit number, by the way, I use record and permit interchangeably, click on the blue hyperlink. If there are additional documents required later in the process, they will pop up in this condition box here. Right? It'll tell you what is needed, and it'll tell you when it's needed too sometimes, I guess. So this one's telling you need a traffic control plan. Okay, any questions on that? You have just successfully submitted your utility permit application. Same steps for both types of permits. The only difference is what documents you're uploading. Okay, so let's talk about once you've submitted an application, or if you want to find your converted permits, how do you find the status of your permits? There's two ways of doing that. You can either, in this Find Existing section, click on the permit street use to find an individual permit. If you want to see a list of all your permits, you go to this My Records page here. If you just want your street use permits, click on your permit street use link here. If you want all your permits, if you use Accela for other departments like SDCI, you can click this My Records overview and show all your permits. Okay, so from your individual permit, you click on the status tab here. And this is how you kind of read your permit status. So the screen check indicates that that task is done. So application is done. The hourglass indicates that something is in process. All right, so you can kind of expand that and kind of see the history. You see that's in process and it's due on 10/9/2020. If the screening task is complete and there were secondary reviewers required, you will see that when you expand the screening task. So you see that SDOT traffic is required for your traffic control plan review. You see it's in process. Due on TBD will just be short-lived until the batch runs at night. But the due date will show up down here. That's some weird Accela functionality. All right, so don't be alarmed if you see due on TBD. It just means the due date is somewhere else. Any questions on that? That's how you read the status of your permit. From your My Records page, you'll find the status under the status column here for all your permits. To open up the individual permit, just click on the blue hyperlink of your permit, right? Once you submit an application, you'll see it in this initiated status. That means we haven't processed the application yet. Okay, so let's talk about how to respond to corrections. We can spin off a correction cycle either from the screening task or the review evaluation task. But please note that if we do it off the review evaluation task, it's going to take you right back to screening because that's the start of the review process. Once we request corrections, your record status will change from in process to awaiting corrections. All right, so this is what it will look like in your My Records page, awaiting corrections. So to respond to a corrections, click on the blue hyperlink permit number to open that up. The status tab will tell you where you're at. You can see this kind of yellow orangey asterisk here next to the review evaluation task indicates that at least one correction cycle has occurred, right? And then your screening task will show as in process here, in process. Your conditions will tell you what documents are required to submit. To learn more about those conditions, and for us, these conditions just really mean a document type, click on the View Condition button. Oh, A is in the wrong section. It goes over here. Okay, so the corrections response document that you may see as a requirement for submitting corrections is just the street use comment sheet with your responses added. Right, so everyone should know what this comment sheet looks like. So if we're asking for you to submit that as the corrections response document, just make sure you add your response to this column right here and then upload that as your corrections. So let's talk about how do you get to the street use comment sheet to begin with. So once you're in your individual permit, you click on the attachments page here, and then you scroll down to find the appropriate corrections document here. And then you click on the blue hyperlink and download that onto your computer to add your responses to. This attachment section is also where you'll find marked up documents, just so for you to know exactly where the corrections are, and also where your printed permit will be once the permit is issued. If you don't, Bill C, do you mean if you don't get a corrections document? I hope that means we're not asking you to submit one with responses. That would be the reason why it's not there. If you want one, if whatever we sent to you is not clear, yeah, you can go ahead and email the reviewer for more information on that. You know, sometimes on minor utility permits, we're not always going to have a street use comment sheet, especially if it's somewhat minor, right? Any other questions on the street use comment sheet and the corrections response document? All right, so once you have all your revised documents, your street use comment sheet with your responses, if that was required, go ahead and click on the attachments section. And same as you were doing in the application process, click on the select button, which will pop up this new window. You'll have to select a document from your computer, tell Accela what document type it is, optionally add in a description of that document, click Save. Right, so repeat those steps until you have all the documents that are required or that you want to upload uploaded. And just know too that whatever the condition document says, so it says right-of-way impact plan, like you have to upload a document that's named right-of-way impact plan to make that condition go away. I also want to highlight that we have a Bluebeam integration. Bluebeam is our plan review software. With this launch, it does require us to use PDF documents. So please, 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 please only upload PDF documents. Please. That'll make the review process go so much faster for us. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, so once you've submitted all the required documents, honor corrections, Bill C, the fillable phase schedule manager should be on the website already. We can send that link out too. Your record status will go from awaiting corrections to corrections submitted. Right? And so that means that is now in our queue to review. I also want to just take a minute to talk about documents due at review evaluation. I call these conditions of review. So these are typically documents that are reviewed outside of the street use permit process, and are due at the end of the review cycle, right? So examples include historic or landmark district certification of approval, pavement moratorium waiver, holiday construction moratorium waiver. So documents that are due at the end of a review will be added at the screening task and show as a required condition. The review process will continue moving forward, but we cannot approve the review evaluation task or complete it, I should say, until those documents have been submitted. But one thing I want to highlight is if we add these required documents at the screening task, you do not get an email about it. You would only know if you went to your record status and saw that. If there is a correction, requiring corrections at the end of review evaluation, that is when the automatic email will be sent to you knowing everything that's required. So I just wanted to let you guys all know that we can require documents. But you don't always get an email noting that we've added that requirement. Okay, any questions on that before we talk about how to make a change to an issued permit? Okay, so we're going to talk about amendments shortly. We do have a workshop next week all about amendments, so I'll go into super duper detail about amendments at next week's workshop, but I'll talk about it at a high level here. So once your permit has been issued, if you need to extend it or make a scope of work change or change a contact or anything like that, you can click this Make Changes button here off of your My Records page, or if you're on the individual permit itself, you can click the Make Changes button on that permit also. That's going to take you to our amendment type page. We have a right-of-way date change option if you need to move your start date up. We have an extension, right-of-way extension amendment if you need to extend your duration. And then we have either utility major or minor utility permit revision, depending on what permit type you applied for. That is the amendment you can make, request a contact change, address change, scope of work, and even cancel a permit. So click on the type of amendment you want and then click Continue Application. So I'm not going to go over the application process for amendments today. That'll be in next week's workshop, but that will start a slightly shorter application process depending on what amendment type you selected. We also have a new amendment type called withdrawal. If you submitted an application in error, you can withdraw that request. So as long as your status is initiated and there's a make changes option available, you can select to withdraw that application. Just know that if we have already started processing on your application, this make changes button goes away and you'll have to just email us at DOT permits. Any questions on that? So you have like 2 to 3 business days to withdraw your application. Okay, let's talk about inspections. We did do an inspection workshop early on. If you want to check that out, if we weren't able to make it on our website. So these are the inspections available on the minor utility and utility major permits. The only difference is the bond release and the curb ramp inspections do not apply to the minor utility permit. I do want to highlight that there are some inspection type changes for the utility major permit. We actually changed this for the SIP process also, just to make sure that our at the end of inspection process looked pretty similar to each permit type. So for UMPS, the final inspection indicates all work is complete, the right-of-way is clear, and all infrastructure is properly installed. The bond release inspection indicates the asset has been accepted and restoration is functioning without defect after the 12-month warranty period. And the acceptance inspection is for non-bonded work with a 5-year warranty per the right-of-way opening and restoration rules. Okay, our inspection notifications are a way to schedule an inspection. This is what's available on the minor utility and UMP permits. The only difference is minor utility does not have the curb ramp option, curb ramp notification. Because we don't permit curb ramps under minor utility permits. Okay, there are a couple of notifications that you can't schedule from the portal. That is the off hours, the work outside of normal working hours. Same process as it is today. You just email DOT street use off hours inspections. Give us a 3 business day advance notice if you need to work outside of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And then pre-con is going to remain offline of the portal too. Pre-construction meetings are only required on UMPS and SIPs. For SIPs, the SIP PM will schedule it. For UMPS, the assigned inspector will schedule it. If you want to request a pre-con, just email your assigned inspector. So for the inspections that you can schedule over the portal, this is how you would do it. From your individual record here, you click on the inspections page, go to your job start or whatever one you're doing. You have to do job start first before any of the other ones will show up. Click on the actions drop-down menu and then click on schedule. And just a reminder, you don't have to be logged in to schedule an inspection. So that'll pop up this calendar window, select the date that you want and the time frame allotted based on your start date and the duration of the work. Once you do that, this window will pop up. Your on-site contact is going to default to the applicant. If that is not the right person, just click on this change contact link here to open up this section and add in the contact information that you want associated with the job start. And then click the Submit button. So this contact should be the one that you want the inspector to contact about your inspections. You can add in some notes in this comments box if you want. This does show up on the inspector work list. So you can say time of day, details of work, whatever information you want to portray to the inspector to make sure they understand what's going on and make sure that they can be there during a certain time if needed. Once you're done, click the Finish button. And as long as you give us a 2 business day lead time, you can reschedule any of these inspections. So if you schedule the job start, then something happened and your dates got off kilter, you can go back into the Inspections tab here. Under Actions, click Reschedule. But just know you can't reschedule if you didn't previously schedule it. Okay, any questions on any of that before we go into our new side sewer permit process? No? Okay. All right. So we coordinated with SDCI kind of early on just to update the side sewer process as it is today, because it hasn't been really updated in a very, very long time. And so the minor utility permit does have the side sewer / drainage use type on it. It is used to permit side sewer, drainage lines, and curb weep holes. It can now be applied for at any time in the portal, as opposed to having to wait until SDCI issued theirs. If you apply to SDCI first on their side sewer permit, you can request that an SDOT permit be created. I'll talk about that in a second. We will follow the normal business process of a minor utility permit with this change. You do have to submit the plans up front, and we can't issue our permit until SDCI's permit is issued, so nothing's changing there. Okay, let's talk about the old side sewer permit process. So we could not start anything until SDCI issued their permit. So if you applied for a side sewer permit through SDCI and you checked one of the right-of-way check boxes, that would ping us through a report that we run every day to issue a SDOT permit. We would either give that SDOT permit a duration of 180 days or 540 days, depending on the street type. And then if a traffic control plan was required, the contractor would submit that after we issued our permit. So as you can see, it was just kind of, we get the intent of what this was trying to achieve, but I think overall this just caused a lot of issues along the system. Also in this old process, SDCI collected fees for both SDOT and SDCI. So let's talk about the new site sewer permit process. There are 2 options on applying for a SDOT side sewer permit. Option 1 is the contractor applies for the SDCI side sewer permit first, right? So in the new, and I'll show what this looks like in a minute, in the new SDCI permit, there'll be a new section that will give you the option to request that an SDOT permit is created, SDOT application is created, right? That SDOT application will be created once SDCI issues their permit, right? And once that application is created, that starts our review process. it'll show as application submitted on our end. So this is the new section that will be on SDCI's side sewer permit. If you want an SDOT permit to be, SDOT application to be created, you check this yes button here, right? Once that application is created, when the SDCI permit is issued, that SDOT permit number will be automatically populated here. And you'll get an email also. If you don't want an SDOT permit application created, click no. If you already have one started, you can enter the number here, right? And again, if you did want the application created, we would use this information to populate the use line that's required at our application, right? So you have to tell us approximate start date and duration. Any questions on that integration there? Anyone applies for sign permits, you'll see a similar section on SDCI sign permit application. Okay, option 2 is the applicant can apply for SDOT's permit at any time. So they can apply for it before they even apply for SDCI. So if you apply for SDOT permit directly from the portal, we'll review it per normal business practice. You will have to submit a right-of-way impact plan as part of that application. And then you can apply for SDCI's permit. We'll issue our permit once SDCI issues theirs. So if you're trying to align issuance events, this is one way to go about it. But, you know, we need to know when that SDCI permit is issued, so you'll need to let us know once that happens. Okay, so just a summary of the new site sewer permit process. It allows contractors to apply for the SDOT permit early to align issuance events. That's some feedback we got from contractors that if there's a traffic control plan required, that the SDOT permit would happen weeks after they got their SDCI permit issued. It allows the contractor to apply for both permits at the same time. For the most part, you have to wait till SDCI's permit is issued, but that's just a couple days. It allows SDOT to review per normal minor utility permit business process. We will use the indicated duration instead of the predetermined 100 and 540 days. It decouples fees, so each department collects their own fees. And SDOT will no longer require the applicant or contractor to be a registered site sewer contractor or a registered paving contractor. SDCI will still require the RSSC, but not SDOT. Any questions on all of that?
Hey, Melody, there's a question about use fees and the new use fee calculator, and I actually don't know the answer. Do you know when the new use fee calculator will roll out? Is there an update on that?
Yeah, that's almost done. I don't know if we're going to be able to get it into our newsletter this Friday, but if it's ready by then, we will. If not, it will be on the website just before launch. Any other questions? Okay, so how to get help during launch is just know that even though we have an Accela phone line and email, most of our support is going to be around the conversion. So getting you connected with your converted permits is going to be our top priority after launch. So we really have worked really hard to get information on our updated websites that'll be ready just before launch, and our help center and the portal to give you the guidance you need so that you don't have to wait long to get the help you need, right? So again, we are updating our website to align with our Accela launch. So please do visit our website, you know, after November 9th. Each of our web pages will have a link to the Seattle Services Portal in the right panel. All right, so I just want to point that out to everyone. You can get to the portal from our web page. And then our help center, we're adding help articles, seems like every week. And we'll continue to do so. If we're getting a lot of questions about something, we'll add a help article. So the 3 sections that are really going to help you out are getting started, managing your account, and then of course our permit street use section. Right, I went over these sections in detail in our Seattle Services Portal overview last week. Okay, so we just went through the utility permits. Later this week, we have construction and street improvement permits, and next week we have amendments. Any other questions?
There was one more question in the FAQ or the QA chat about UMP applications without a phase schedule manager, and if they'll be able to be issued. I think Andrew was with SPU. I think it's similar to the SPU UMPs that get issued with no use spaces, but I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, William, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. That depends on these, Andrew. These are mainline that you're working with. It may be under a SIP permit that you're working with. It depends on what it is. That's something you'll be working probably with Diane Flores to work out and get it sorted out.
Yeah, so the SIP public main won't have any use fees attached to it. We do have to issue permits with at least one use line, but SIP permits don't get use fees. So you'll have to kind of work it out with them what you want shown. If you're needing the contractor to go and get the actual construction permits, I think that's what you're speaking to. You probably just want to have, dummy data. Any other questions? Okay, well, my name is Melody Berry. If you have any questions, please let me know. We'll get the recording of this workshop and the PowerPoint up on the website by end of week. If you're not already on our newsletter subscription, please get on our newsletter subscription. You can do that in our Accela website update, Accela updates website page. And also we'll have information on there. All right, thank you everyone. Appreciate your time.